procurement solution that supports over 7,000 buying organizations throughout the US and Canada, and over 1 million suppliers throughout that as well. So we really talk to both and serve both the supplier community that work with you, the government buyers, and governments from state and local agencies throughout North America. And we want to talk today about those trends in public procurement, and there are lots of them. So here's just a few that we've gathered from NASPO, from talking with our customers, from different surveys that we've offered and different um, webinars and other communications that we've had throughout the last couple of months leading up to this, of what are people looking at as priorities and trends in the new year. And so, as I said, just a few. We're not going to go through all of these today. We're not going to have much time to. So we're going to focus on four main trends, which is AI. I'm sure you all are very aware of AI. I'm really interested to know anything about it, what you're doing, what you're not doing, but you want to, etc. So we're going to talk about those trends. Procurement agility, right? How are you utilizing technology and your processes to be agile when a new guideline comes out, a new law or policy comes out that you have to switch gears to? Local and diverse suppliers, how are you handling and what are your plans for that? And vendor relationship management. I serve on the NIGP Business Council. And so this one is really important to me, is continuing that dialogue of what does that relationship look like into 2025. So, as I said, you're going to kind of hear zip out of me for the rest of it, except for to lead our marvelous panel here and talk about our first trend, which is AI and data. And so, Mike, I'm going to kick this off with you. How are AI and data analytics currently transforming in the public sector procurement arena?
Yeah, no, thanks, Ken. So I think the key piece you highlighted is actually the combination of the two. When you look at just in general, whether it's public procurement or not, leveraging AI technology, I always refer to it as, it was kind of years ago when the big buzzword was the cloud, right? All of our technology was moving to the cloud. Now it's AI, but what does that really mean for your organization? And one of the things that I found is, foundationally, is looking at enterprise data, whether it's a single system like Sobra or a data strategy that combines those into a data lake or data lakehouse to allow you to leverage the power of AI, is really, it starts with your data management and data strategy. Um, I like to say, there's a lot of potential in public procurement with AI and the use of AI, but it really foundationally, it's kind of that, an inoperable system, ensuring data quality and making sure that, your existing systems, talk or are integrated seamlessly. Uh, for me, it's coming from the procurement. I was a practitioner first before an implementer, and then now a technology nerd. In this space is, traditionally procurement has been thought of as the system of record. And I think with AI, data analytics, we see kind of this transition from system of record to what I like to refer to as a system intelligence, but not stopping there. And really, when we look at, especially how we try to help our customers, is a system of action. So leveraging the analytics, the AI portion, to allow our customers to make better and faster decisions. And then two pieces that I know we'll go into in a little more detail, but I think kind of giving real use cases. You mentioned vendor management. I'm seeing a huge emphasis and focus on, which has been there, but now we're looking at it as how can AI enable and help that, and that's improving supplier diversity and local preference. So how do we use AI to, whether it's automatically identifying, underutilized, underrepresented suppliers, and make sure that they have access to those opportunities, whether it's through how we present solicitations, how they match with potential solicitations and opportunities. And the next one that we'll get into it when we talk about kind of how we execute on some of these, is leveraging AI and natural language processing to make evaluation, so bid evaluations, more efficient. And when we look at just the volume, right, from a number of responses to just document heavy solicitations, and how do we streamline that evaluation process?
Great, great points. Thanks so much. And Whitney, do you have anything to add on to the conversation there from your perspective?
One of the things that we're noticing is there's been a shift because our vendors are using AI as well, not just on our end for writing specs. So we're seeing kind of tighter submissions from vendors because they are able to kind of hone in on our specs versus just kind of, you know, throwing something at the wall. The other thing we're seeing is less redundancy due to being able to run these through some of the AI models that are out there. One other thing I wanted to mention is there's a lot of negotiation support that we can use through AI that kind of hasn't been tapped in the past. So I do think there's a lot of emerging opportunities coming along. One thing I wanted to point out as well is that we are not seeing these slides change.
Thank you for not seeing the slides, just for telling me, because I'm going to start. Can you all see this now or no?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that's
All right. Well, let me go back in time so at least you can see everyone's names up there, who are our awesome panelists. No wonder you here you go. So here's our panelists' names too, in case you want to stalk them as well on LinkedIn. I mean, connect with them with lots to share. So sorry about that, but thank you so much for letting me know.
another
All
thing
right.
that we can gain from AI is actually reducing risk. And that's a big thing that we can kind of point to as well. So just to end on that note.
No, great points. And anyone else have anything to add before I move on?
Just one thing, Kim, AI is starting to become very popular, not in just preparing solicitations, but also evaluating responses. It's really cutting the time for agencies to look at responses, try to get to the important things that are in their responses. It can also identify if it's a real response or an AI generated response by certain keywords and phrases that you might find in response.
Yeah, that's good to know. And Whitney, if you don't mind me with a little follow-up question to what you said you're seeing a positive results from the vendor community utilizing more of those responses. Have you had internal talks about if it's going to be a problem at all, or a greater risk that they are utilizing AI to respond?
Yes, actually, that is one of the things that we're working toward now. My teammate, Kelsey Carter, is actually part of the GovAI coalition. So she's bringing a lot of this kind of best practice back to our agency. And what we are seeing is because they're able to just feed our evaluation criterion as well as our exact specs, we are seeing those submissions that are more geared that way rather than seeing more of a broad response. So for us, that's been really helpful. We are aware of the fact that we probably need to update some of our internal processes and policies based on that, just to find out which vendors are using it versus which ones are not. So yeah, that's kind of where we are right now with that.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. So now, Brittany, I'll go to you on this one. So what areas of the procurement process do you think are best to start experimenting with and implementing AI and data analytics? We got into this a little bit, but have there been any with you that you've experimented with?
Absolutely. So as was mentioned, I guess the most common use of current AI in procurement is to help with writing scope of work, writing documents, and processing documents. So if you haven't started at all, my first suggestion would be to go to chatgpt.com and start playing around with it. It's on your web browser. Just type in scope of work for HVAC services or how to start a vegetable garden. Start typing in different phrases and words and see how that manipulates the answers that you received. Because just like in most writing, you want to be concise, to the point, and how you use the language changes the results that you get. Other platforms that are used would be like Grammarly. Microsoft Copilot is another popular one. It's really low risk. There's no data transmission with it. Because like what Mike was talking about with data analytics, you can also go on to use stuff and research like DocuSign or other programs that you do feed it data, and then it analyzes and organizes data or gives you results based off input that's put into it, which has been a huge deal, like with agreements and other large files that you need information quickly from. For books, I got two that I thought were really cool. The Public Sector Survival Guide for ChatGPT, and they have a Zero to Hero chat prompting in 30 days, both written by Robert Haidt.
Brittany, if
And
you
on a,
could do me a favor when you're
yeah,
done talking, if you want to put that into the chat GPT for everybody to see.
yeah,
Okay, great.
no
Thank you.
problem. And also on another note, I would encourage everybody to really look into AI language and lingo, because it's not only in how procurement is using AI, but I know here at the college, when we receive responses, a lot of our vendors are using AI not only in their responses, but using AI for scanning, like applications. And we had one that we're using for campus maps. We're doing a virtual walkthrough like you would at the house. And they use AI and drones for some of that footage. So you really have to be and look into the regulations and laws when it comes to AI, drones, how that information is gathered, how it's going to be stored. So I think there's two sides to it, is how you can use it, and then be aware of how vendors are going to use it when they apply to your solicitations.
Those are great points. Mike, do you have anything to follow up there? And then I'm going to ask a third question that we were asked that I think is really important over the chat too.
Yeah, so I think what Brittany highlighted is it's pretty amazing how fast and ChatGPT craze and all the different AI tools have kind of come to market. And it's amazing kind of the potential that they all have. And it started, I remember, gosh, probably less than a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago. It was all this discussion around prompt engineers and a new career field. And it's actually evolved from that, where anyone, like Brittany highlighted, can start with ChatGPT and just asking questions how you start to build threads, and it will learn from threads, and kind of puts that power in just any general individual or user's hands to be able to kind of play around and see how it may drive efficiency. And I mean, I've used some of the AI tools you mentioned in on my personal life as well as work. So there's so much utility in the Gen AI. I think one of the things for us that we're super excited about when you look at the system landscape in procurement is traditionally, when you're running searches or data analytics, very specific filters or search criteria, is kind of building on that first step of the just, opening up ChatGPT, asking questions, is embedding kind of what we refer to as that NLP workflow throughout our process. And so that's natural language processing, which means just like all of us are having a conversation right now, we're able to ask questions. So, John, you mentioned, I'm really excited about the potential in bid evaluation. I've seen numbers from 60 to 75% reduction in evaluation time just by that first pass of, are there any general compliance admissibility issues, are there incomplete answers, and really kind of standardizing and making sure it's apples to apples for the stuff that is more qualitative versus quantitative in the evaluation process. And then the next one where we started with that I'm excited about is analytics. So, a big push and things that we're looking at is generative BI. And so rather than having to, have someone that knows how to write SQL, all of these very complex queries, being able to ask a procurement system a question, just all if we were having this conversation, and it start to build that the data visualizations, the different report elements. I think that becomes very powerful for one, just efficiency, as well as the data analytics and insight that can be gained naturally from procurement operational data.
Sure.
I think that's great. We have a lot of people who have a lot of questions on AI here, and now I kind of like just lost my one that I was going to ask you guys. So I think it's important to ask this one. And we will get back to everybody who's asked questions. If we don't have time, we will get back or send these questions off to our panelists too, to continue on the conversation. So keep them coming. But one of them was, can you discuss the use of AI in software, hardware products, and how risk is assessed with data privacy and downstream threats? And I know this is a question we get often with AI. Is it closed looped? Is it open loop? Those types of things. So, Mike, I don't know if you want to answer this, or anyone else who wants to answer, who feels they have.
I can start, and then please feel free, anyone, to jump in. So it's obviously a question we get a lot, and Brittany, you alluded to, going to ChatGPT, and then where you start to get into that gray area of what's public data versus controlled for the public agency. And so one of the ones, our infrastructure primarily is AWS. So some of you may have heard, and I actually, if you haven't checked it out, and I'll put it in the chat, is Claude AI. It's really, really good, just like ChatGPT. What I really like is their voice to text integration in Claude, and how you can build projects is really, really interesting. But for us, it's closed loop in the sense that it's learning from your data. You always own your data, but it's part of your infrastructure. And Kim, like you said, closed loop, where it's not going out to publicly sourced data, where it's then one from a security standpoint, but also just available from a public access standpoint. So a lot of stuff we're talking about, is really closed loop, especially when we get into the internal, buyer public agency side. Now, I will say on the supplier side, we heard some of those use cases. There's a lot of potential for the suppliers in just writing to a solicitation, which has been posted and is publicly available, to help them write their responses, automate some of that, and manage kind of on the supplier side. But I'd say that's kind of where we see the line. And again, it's an ever shifting line, but really anything public agency internal, we always, it's a closed loop process. The customer always needs to own their data, ensure that the security and privacy is in place. Where I think there is more utility on the supplier side for some of these like responses and how they're managing things, to use some of the just standard, Chat GPTs or Claude AI or Copilot.
Great.
So on the supplier side, as far as integrating AI into software, here at LCC, we have a lot of student applications that come in, which I'm sure as a public agency, you guys have tons of forms that have to come in, usually from the public or from suppliers, vendors, or community members. And we found that, hackers are always a problem, or people wanting to fraudulently apply and get in to be able to then use internal systems or to try and get money. So one of the newer processes that LCC has integrated that has AI in it is application scanning software to check for autofills, to check for bots, to check for other fraudulent information that's coming in. And I would say that that was LCC's first major system that we've allowed that used a high AI component integrated in with our data. But that was a combined effort between purchasing, legal, and our IT department. And I guess whenever you're looking at AI, we talk about using it for the writing portion, but the integration portion, like what he's talking, you can do closed when you're talking using it for writing and processing data. But when you bring vendors in that are using this information, you really have to be careful and check the terms and conditions, check how that data is going to be used, stored, user rights, what happens worst case scenario, because it can save a lot of manpower. It can catch things that humans always can't. There is a lot of good with it, but there's a lot of risk. And so as we see more of that being integrated in, which we're just going to continue to, you just really have to be educated and aware of what questions should you ask and who should be at the table when you're looking at those services or softwares.
I think it's great. And again, I think this is going to be a continued trend throughout 2025. And as I forget who mentioned it, that, a year ago, there was a kind of a different talk track towards this, and now it's shifted. And I guarantee you within the next 12 months, when we're talking about a recap of next year, things will have shifted again. And so this brings me to your question now, hopefully. I'm going to sit here and launch a poll, which is on AI to all of the people. If you could take a moment to look through this and answer what's your procurement's team current level of involvement with AI? I always think I should have a little song and dance here to do, but I need to get on that for the next one of these, because I swear I mention it every time. Thanks so much for everybody for responding. I'm going to give you like 4 more seconds on the countdown. 3, 2, 1. All right, we're going to end this poll, share the results with everyone. So it looks like the majority of people, 53%, still have nothing to date. And some of about 35% of you are in the stage of exploration and research, which is great. And there are a few of you who have launched and are using AI solutions, which is fantastic. So feel free to share how that's going with everyone too. Thank you very much. We'll have a couple more polls throughout too to keep you guys in the loop as well and sharing your feedback. And now we're going to move on to a next trend. I know we could spend an entire hour or more talking about AI, but our next trend is agile procurement. And so this one, I think I'm going to start with you, Whitney, which is, what role does technology play in enhancing that procurement agility and being able to respond to a change in regulations or demands?
This is a great question, and I'm excited to talk on it first because when I joined my current organization, we were 100% paper. Our POs were done on paper, our solicitations were done on paper, and that was in 2021. I don't want anyone to think that I'm much older than I am, because I'm really not. One of the things that I did when I first started was take us from the paper process into BidNet, now Sovra, and the efficiencies we've gained have been astronomical. And that is just one little piece of technology that's being utilized here. One of the things that I like to say is nothing moves as quickly as tech unless it's change. Those are the two things that we can always count on. So we're consistently evolving, and anytime we aren't using tech, we are definitely going to be missing out on some of the different cues that are in the market, like AI, like data analytics, all of these different things that are really huge. There's been a huge push for real-time data, and that is, again, we can thank tech for that. We're further informing our decision-making. We can streamline compliance and automate compliance. Anytime we can automate something, I know it's true in many agencies, we're expected to do more with less. And the best way to do that is with technology. We're able to reach a lot further and a lot faster when we have these great technology solutions at our fingertips. So we have the ability to pivot. If anyone remembers, if you worked in public procurement during COVID hit, many people were forced to go online that weren't already there. There's so many areas where we can increase efficiencies, increase transparency, and better serve our communities. So that's my shtick.
Great, thank you. And John, do you have anything to add on procurement agility and how you're able to respond to those changes?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I try to focus on too is, in addition to like looking at the technology piece, just to kind of back off a little bit and before you get into that, you look at your business processes, right? I think we've all been in a position where we implement an e-procurement system. and we replicate what was done in the past without eliminating the things that shouldn't be automated in the first place. For example, asking for 12 signatures on a $1,000 purchase order. It's important to map out your business processes first and try to figure out. I don't want to replicate a bureaucratic process in an e-procurement system or any technology platform. I want to take step away from the technology and make sure I'm eliminating unnecessary processes before I implement the technology.
And I think that's a great point. And I think that's when everything pure happens, is when your processes are aligned with the right technology, and it can really do what Whitney talked about, which is making things more efficient, making things better. I've had many conversations where Brittany has sorry, Whitney. I was looking at Brittany, but Whitney has, you all have to have rhyming names, has actually made some of those process changes. And I'm not sure if you did it because of the technology or because you thought it was a process change, but we've talked about taking those RFQs and quick quotes kind of out of the hands of your end users and into procurement's hands, so you can have more audit and control over that, but deliver also better results and faster and more diverse suppliers as well.
Actually,
So
that's a perfect plug for Sovra, because I personally use the quick quote process quite often via the BidNet website. And it essentially works like my documented quote process, except that I'm able to reach a gazillion more vendors versus just calling the top 3 that show up in Google. And that has been massively helpful to my organization. Groups that previously had only worked with 1 or 2 local vendors have suddenly been given a plethora of options that they did not have before. And that really is a testament to the quick quote ability that Silver and BidNet provide.
Absolutely.
great. Thank you. I wasn't really looking for a plug there. I just always love that story about how you changed that process.
Well, Kim, I got to put in a plug because, Whitney, I implemented BidNet in 2 different agencies. So
Yeah, well, we thank you very much. Okay, so that's actually a really good segue to these local and diverse suppliers, which is our next topic here. So Whitney, I'm going to go back to you now and talk about just that. How can procurement policies be adjusted to help support the inclusion of diverse suppliers?
One of the best things that I've found is first of all, I'm very lucky because I work for a home rule city, so we're able to very quickly update our rules and policies around procurement. Also, my stuff isn't codified. So for that, I just go to the city manager, we have a discussion. We usually meet 2 or 3 times on something, and then we implement the change. So we're very fortunate here. I respect that that's not the case for everyone. So when it's not, I definitely implore you to go out and speak with your teams and learn how you can adjust your policies to actually be more inclusive, because there's definitely some really good opportunities out there. And if that's not on the table for you right now, then go back to those lower dollar threshold items and start opening that up to some of your local suppliers. It's so easy just to meet with these folks. They're local, so they love coming to your agency. They love sitting down face to face and having a quick conversation about what they offer, how they do things. And they'll be almost always, I had one last Friday actually, where they were like, well, we're locally owned, we are women owned, we're minority owned. And they went through this whole thing. And I was like, this is fantastic. All you have to do is XYZ, and we're off to the races. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here for us to start updating some things and making more room for a different group of suppliers.
Thank you so much. I couldn't agree more. And Brittany, anything to add there from your perspective?
Yeah, so tying into the processes she's talking about. So I do multi-award contracts. So if you are looking to do we all have limited time. So if you're going to do an ITB for, logoed hats, bags, and pens, you can do line item awards. So you might have a local vendor that can give you the best price on just bags, and then a different supplier that can do, pens and hats. But the multi-award opens it up for the specialty shops. The other thing that I like to do is work with your small business development centers, your local chamber of commerce, other support systems that these small businesses go to. And then you can host how to do business with and just get them familiar with the process, because these people are not trained in administration most of the time. They have their specialties, they start a business, and most of our forms are not always people friendly, which making them as smooth and as people friendly and straightforward is also another way to help everybody. Make it as short and sweet as you can. Make sure that, you can just open a Word document and type in the answer. So those are the two big ones. Of course, going to vendor fairs is always good. And then if you have time, you can even host a get to know the college with your vendors. Have the vendors come in, see your campus, see what you need, and meet with people.
And actually, before we move on, that opened up a really good thing that I forgot to mention. When I met with this group of vendors last week, they actually said, for some of your construction bids, it might be helpful if you opened up some line items there as well, because one group of subcontractor may only do the excavation versus doing the actual build. So that's another thing that we can all kind of consider. And yeah, I had one other thing, but I lost it. So anyway, thank you. That was great.
I wanted to answer one of the questions that came through in the chat. It said,
Of course.
they're having issues finding certified diverse vendors is the issue. And there's a couple different ways that I've gone about this, because I do a lot of federal procurements and grants. So using BidNet, you can search vendors with the backgrounds, but also for non-bids and supplies. So if you use like Amazon Business, you can check and sort which preference vendors or vendor types or certifications that you want to buy from. So a lot of the modern platforms that are coming up, I know Walmart Business just launched. I think they're a little bit behind the ball in what they offer, but they'll get there. But these platforms that we buy from, or we have our users use their P cards from, a lot of them allow us to dictate the policy of what they see first, or what is our preference. And as you do that, you can then track spend of how much money you're spending with small minority owned, how much are you spending with veteran owned, how much are you spending with women owned. And then as that grows, you can then just continue on. But definitely use technology and the resources that are out there to increase that outreach.
No, I think that's fantastic. And I'll just add on, because this is like super important to my heart. Even if you don't have procurement policies that you can adjust to specifically support inclusion of diverse suppliers, when you do take things local and to small business, that increases the diversity alone, and keeps that spend back in your own community, in your own county, in your own state. And so while I love our large suppliers too, I really have a soft spot for those small, local, diverse suppliers. And oftentimes they can't, as a couple of people have noted, they can't actually spend weeks upon weeks to answer these huge RFPs, nor do they have the support or the inventory or the money to get the inventory or the team to do that. So starting with those quick quotes or those under threshold items to that group of local suppliers is a fantastic way for both them to get their feet in the door of working with local government and build up their resume as well, so they can go out and work with others. It's a little extra plug. So thank you all very much. And then this goes kind of on the same topic here. John, we'll start with you. What strategies can different government agencies adopt to drive that innovation and better outcomes through supplier diversity?
Well, I'd like to thank both Brittany and Whitney for the segue because they got into some of the talking points that I was going to bring up. I think partnering with agencies that do support diverse businesses is important. I know at Broome County, we did work with the SBA. I know Whitney mentioned that. We also worked with, Binghamton University is a big player in our community. Urban League, the Urban League, we did a number of vendor classes for people at the Urban League. And this was mentioned too. And Brittany, I think you mentioned it too. There may not be an opportunity for like a diverse supplier to enter the public sector as a prime contractor, but prime contractors are always looking for subcontractors, and the subcontractors taking on the risk, the insurance, all the paperwork associated, and then the manpower associated with putting in a bid, but they still need that diverse subcontractor base to meet their targets that they might have on specific grants. And a lot of times the diverse businesses don't see that as a way. So we're always trying to connect the prime contractors with potential subcontractors. It's a great opportunity. And then finally, if you can push for increasing your discretionary spending limits at your particular agency to create more opportunity for those businesses, and try to do some outreach to increase, add those particular suppliers on your vendor lists.
Great. Thank you. Mike, anything to add to that discussion?
Yeah, actually, it was all teed up very well. Early on in my career, I had a former boss and mentor tell me a strategy without data and analytics is just a guess. And so, Brittany, you kind of alluded to it. If the first kind of looking at where we have underutilized small businesses, just having that visibility in our spend allows us to kind of set that strategy. And we've had early success. And I came from the implementation side, so being able to identify potential outreach umbrella groups to do specific outreach to groups of vendors. I think Whitney, you also alluded to the other thing is be open to feedback. And so as part of that outreach, why maybe aren't they bidding? So once you're looking at that data, why aren't they bidding, or why do they feel like it's too cumbersome or hard to do business? To try to drive up at least the participation, then of course hopefully the increased opportunity. And then John, you alluded to the last piece that I'm super excited about of one of our near-term roadmap items. I came out of federal contracting before I came over to the local side, and prior to joining Sober, I was actually running my own small business. And one of the things as a small business, it's like, hey, the reality is some of these larger projects, IT implementation, infrastructure, you don't have the capacity to deliver, but you have the skill set. And Whitney, I think you mentioned it, of like opening up a couple line items. And on the federal side, they do that a lot. So it's like putting your hand up as a small business of, we're calling it our express interest capability and partner and teaming through our supplier portal, of allowing small diverse businesses to say, hey, I'm interested in this opportunity, and then facilitate that collaboration to hopefully drive more partnership with the large and small business community, but also increase visibility for those primes that are looking for qualified small businesses to help them deliver on that contract.
Yeah, we actually had a number of successful meet and greets with the prominent construction companies that were looking for, for good subcontractors. And it's just, the connection isn't always apparent. And I think it's important for us to try to introduce both parties to each other.
Yes, for sure. And right now there are tools that they can use to do that. But it's something that they can see, but as Mike said, there's not really a way to kind of raise their hand and say, yes, I am very interested in this. I'm open for teaming. It's more of I'm interested because I've downloaded and read the specs and the documents, and so that's really now taking it to that next level. We've also had, I know that there are some customers who do have their own small business or certification process within their own organization. And so they've kind of taken this a step further. They have that certification process and that group of certified suppliers in one place. And then they allow their primes to come in and work from that approved contractor list to get their subs. And so we've seen that as well, which is a great thing for both too. Okay, next poll question here for everyone. Oops, sorry. I'm gonna get back here. I am having some crazy problems with technology today. I apologize. But the next one that I would love to ask you all as the audience, what is your primary barrier today to increasing that supplier diversity? So I think a couple of people said lack of outreach resources or not knowing how to attract or gain those others. But here's a list. If you write other, that's fine. Do me a favor though, write in the chat what that other is, because I don't think it allows you a way to put that in. So if you don't mind, if you are one of the 5 people so far who have written other. Awesome. I'm going to give you guys like 5 more seconds. We'll do the countdown again. 3, 2, still have some more coming in. So I'm going to do a really long pause until I get to 1. All right, we'll end the poll now. Thanks so much. All right, so the results were very split, a limited supplier available like in certain categories, which I understand, complex requirements, totally get that, and lack of outreach resources, and other, hopefully you all shared some things. I haven't opened up the chat yet, but thank you very much for that. All right, trend number 4, which is vendor relationship management here. So I'm going to start with you on this one, Brittany, which is how does vendor relationship management contribute to achieving procurement goals and your organization's objectives?
Yes, thank you. I do not think in procurement we talk about this enough and how important it is to have good relationships with our vendors. I think this really came to light during COVID when there was a huge supply and demand issue. And that relationship building that we had done, if you had done it through the years, really showed. So communication. I know when I work with my vendors, I've had some of them, especially during the 3 years during COVID, that would call me and be like, look, I'm really sorry, your equipment's not going to be here. Like, it's behind, I can't tell you a date, and I just said, okay, thank you for letting me know. Please keep me updated. And I could just hear the sigh on the phone. Like, he was just like, thank you for understanding. He's like, I've had so many people, yell at me. They were upset because, they had deadlines and they had this and this. And I knew he couldn't do anything about it. It's not like he could make things ship faster. He couldn't make things, magically appear. And my deadlines and my cost issues couldn't be solved by him. And, I've worked with him for years after. And he kept me informed. He kept communication open. And if he knows there's going to be product shortages and stuff that I regularly buy or our department uses, he'll reach out to me and, hey, just so you know, price increases are set to this date, or these things are shipping and delayed. So if you need an order, you might want to do it soon. So that communication and understanding and treating them as humans will make our jobs a lot easier, because a lot of our goals is we want competition, right? So we want vendors to be able to want to work with us, which means that we have to be personable, we have to be reasonable, we have to be clear, and we have to treat them with respect. And that's going to help us retain good vendors that are reliable, that are going to communicate with us, and that will be consistent. So that's a big thing. It also helps with product availability and problem solving. I guess another example I had was during COVID. Here at Lansing Community College, we have a nursing and a dental program. And so we have several other health care services that we do for students. So we needed PPE. And I have a good relationship with my local Amazon business rep. And what I didn't know was that there was a side Amazon PPE ordering site for those only with medical need and credentials. So when I reached out to my Amazon rep and I was like, I really need these N95 masks, I need these medical gowns at this grade, I need these gloves because I have students that are working at the local hospitals in COVID units. Or, I have dental students that are working with the community for emergency needs in XYZ. So by talking with my representative, she was able to get me into the Amazon PPE ordering site for those that had medical need. Now we had to provide our credentials that we were a teaching institution and this is what we were doing. But had I not had that relationship, I wouldn't have been able to talk with her and even know that that existed. So I think that vendor relationships can help you solve so many problems because they're out there. Like they network with each other. Even if they don't know, they're going to know somebody who's going to know. And sometimes their connections and solutions are better sometimes than what we can think of.
Great. Thank you so much. And Whitney, anything to add to that on the achieving your goals through vendor management?
Yeah, this is really kind of the bread and butter, I think, of procurement people. Without these relationships, we're really just cutting POs and getting work done. It's the relationship part that is really what we do. This is the art of procurement, I think. It's kind of on our shoulders to manage customer service both internally and externally. And I have seen this countless times where the internal end user thinks that they can just go through and do whatever they want because the vendor's working for them. But at the end of the day, these vendors are also taxpayers in our community. They are part of our internal system that keeps the city afloat. So it's really important that we do manage those relationships in a positive way. We don't want to have a bad experience with a vendor because someone on the agency side just thinks they have it that way, I suppose. So that's honestly, I think that by nurturing those relationships, we have a much better chance of actually delivering on the services that are needed throughout our communities.
Great point. And are there any processes and tools? I'll kick this one off with because I think we have 10 minutes. I think we're doing good on time. But John, I'll kick this off with you. Are there any tools or processes that can be utilized to assist in the monitoring and improving supplier performance as a whole, part of that relationship?
I think that the key is you really want to establish clear metrics on how the vendor is to be evaluated to beginning, and it can't be a number that and I try to stick to 5 to 7 key points, like might be delivery, service, response time, things like that nature. So it's important to establish clear metrics. I also think of like our role, and I'd be interested to know what the rest of the group thinks. We're kind of like mediators between the suppliers and the internal users, and a lot of times it's incumbent upon us to try to make sure that that communication is always happening. I'm sure we've all had instances where Our internal users have not been happy with a particular supplier, but we've never been informed that they're not happy with the supplier of the situation. So you can do things like put in like databases for reporting issues and timeliness. There's commercial software out there to do things that Kim, I know a lot of these things are incorporated in the Silver platforms. So that's the real key, is just to try to envision your role as the mediator between the supplier community, the supplier community, and also your internal users. It's not feasible to do this with all of your vendor, your particular suppliers, but you might want to do some Pareto analysis to figure out, okay, 20% of my suppliers give, or 80% of the spend, and then focus on that 20% and do regular performance meetings where you go over these key metrics, and just try to evaluate things on a quarterly basis or whatever the frequency is, rather than have like problems at the end of the contract period, and neither party was really well informed of what's going on. And just one final point, I think we have to all be honest that all the suppliers, all the issues are not on the supplier end. A lot of times it's it's us as customers. We're not setting clear expectations. We're not fulfilling our end of the bargain, and just understand it's a two-way street to make it a productive relationship.
That's great. And Mike, I'm going to get to you in one more second, but it's a really good tie-in here to a new NIGP Business Council white paper that just dropped last week. That's up on NIGP's website. I'll find the name of it in a second and put it in the chat if I can. It's called Putting the Pieces Together, but it basically talks about making certain that you're not evaluating that supplier on their performance on things that were completely unrelated to the procurement itself and the evaluation and how they won that job to begin with. And so it's a really good white paper. Okay, now Mike, anything to add to this tools and processes?
No, the conversation, it warms my heart to hear, because one of the big things I say at the end of the day, right, we're, don't forget to be kind and be human. We're all humans. Like, it feels like, and in procurement, I think it's emphasized because of just the transactional nature, is that it becomes so transactional, versus when you highlighted of building those relationships. There's going to be times where things go a little sideways, but that relationship you built, we can have the best predictive analytics, contract performance monitoring in place, but at the end of the day, that doesn't displace the relationships. And I think, as a software, our job is to provide a platform to help facilitate that, but it doesn't take the human aspect of it. So it's great to hear, having been on the buyer side originally in government contracting, but then been on the consulting software side for a long time, to hear those types of comments. Because you're right, Brittany, you said you heard a sigh of relief. I think sometimes there's this panic of, I've got to tell this customer I've worked with for however long that something's going wrong. But having built that relationship, I'm sure you get those reactions a lot. So it's great to hear.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of add on to what John said too. So we have regular performance review schedule for our internal customers, but we also do vendor surveys once a year, because I want to know, we export a list out of our our ESP system, and then do a mail merge, send out a survey. How are you, how's your relationship with us do? How are you being communicated with? Are you being paid timely? Any other relevant questions I can't think of right now. But those vendor surveys are really important, because a lot of the time we hear it one-sided, from our customers. Well, they didn't do this. This was late. They left it outside of the door. Well, what they didn't tell you was the door was locked, or the directions were wrong, or, there's a whole bunch of circumstances that you didn't hear from the other side. And so when you do these vendor surveys, you can know what training you need to do for your internal customers too. So we do both regular vendor performance for our internal customers with our high usage, and then we do vendor surveys so they can survey us and let us know, well, what are areas of improvement we need for
That
that.
is great. Yeah, and I think that's really important too, is that information both ways. All right, this is the last poll, I promise, for those of you who are still here. I thank you very much. And this is on vendor participation itself. And that's kind of, how do you measure the success of your initiatives to increase that vendor performance, or sorry, that vendor participation. So got so much on vendor performance there. And this one, I'm going to cut a little bit short, so let's try to be quick if possible. I'm so sorry. I know it's not easy to read through all these, but I feel like I already know the answer, because every time I ask this question at any type of event, I always get the same overwhelming answer. So I'm going to give you guys a countdown of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. And it is still overwhelmingly the number of bids received per solicitation is how you measure the success of those initiatives. So thank you very much. I love that the diversity of bidding actually is at 10%. So that's great. A couple more quick little pieces. If you want to continue on this conversation, I really would love to see you at Silver Summit. I've put the link in the chat there. I think these are some of the conversations we're going to be having at Summit, along with tying in some actual technology. And so we'd love to see you there. Check it out, please, if you can. And it's the day before NIGP Leadership Summit, if you're already going there. And for those of you who asked specific questions and dropped your info, we'll make certain that our great panelists have that information. And if you haven't, connect with us on LinkedIn. And that's about it, unless there's any parting thoughts from our esteemed and awesome panel here. Okay, well then I want to thank our panel, Brittany, Whitney, John, Mike. Thank you so much for taking the time out and sharing your insight. And it's been super informative, and we could have had this conversation all afternoon, or basically from now through Christmas. And thank you all on the as attendees as well. We appreciate you being here. Everyone have a very happy holiday, a safe and healthy new year. And we'll be back in 2025 to see how these trends continue to evolve. So thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Kim, people want to
Bye,
know if
everyone.
they're going to
Happy
get a
holidays.
recording.
Oh, yes, I think we are going to send out a recording. Yes.
You.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Oops. Oh, there you are. So it went okay, Kim?
Yes, we are still in here, though, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay.